Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. For Kelly, meeting Anthony was a certain salvation. A dark, empty hole had been growing in her soul until that moment. A girl of golden youth had never known rejection for anything. Her mother, a former Miss Beauty, cared only about not repeating or losing the attention of men, who, like a perpetual motion machine, had her running around the fitness halls, fashion salons, and beauticians. Her daughter had little interest in her. Her father was much older than her mother, calm, attentive, and so kind, but he was at work all the time. He paid attention, but it was not enough. Sometimes it even seemed as if he was hiding from some of life's problems at work. Kelly always wore the best clothes, and she had the best phone, and her teachers were a little afraid of her. Her classmates didn't like her for that. At university, learning became a lifesaver. She liked everything around her. New friends of friends appeared. A first love that was bitter and destructive. Fell in love with the most spectacular, handsome man, who was so good that it seemed next to this guy just turned off his brain. I understood that he came from a very wealthy, powerful family. He did not love anyone but himself. All of his former girlfriends were looked down upon and arrogant. He laughed at them behind their backs. And it was at that moment, when she did not hear him discussing his ex-girlfriend, calling her unflattering words, should have stopped to understand that Kelly would be another. But she couldn't resist the animal passion that was pushing her into this relationship. Kelly had always been distinguished by her intelligence and cleverness. Looking at her mother, who had only brands in her head, Kelly tried to be completely different. She studied. She graduated from high school without a medal, but with honors. At university, she selflessly immersed herself in her studies. She wanted to break stereotypes, to be not only beautiful but also smart. First beauty of the university noticed her and made another. If Kelly fell in love with him with all her heart and soul, opened her welcoming arms to him, gave him her purity and innocence, which for him was the next tick. As soon as he played, he just stopped communicating. I tried to meet him, to call him, but he didn't respond. One day I saw him near the university, jumped out the window and noticed him in an embrace with his classmate. All realized in my subconscious screamed to leave, not to make a scene, to keep my dignity. But her emotions overwhelmed her. She approached, asked, faced with a huge amount of unpleasant words and ridicule. Her heart bled. The soul was empty. After that, there was an emptiness. I couldn't tune into my studies again. I just couldn't seem to breathe. One day, walking in the park, I felt an inner emptiness, a complete lack of awareness of the surrounding objective reality. I sat down on a bench, around the trees, calm. The smell of pine trees, which sighed with incredible pleasure. The soul is empty. There was pain in my heart. It hurt even from the fact that I couldn't tell anyone anything to my friends. I did not want to give a reason for gossip. You couldn't tell your father. And her mother. She didn't want to say anything. All to herself. Her heart and her soul from holding everything and seemed to be just crumbling. She hadn't slept much lately. Nothing interested her. She wanted to forget everything and start over. But she couldn't. You look very sad. She nearly jumped up and down on the bench from the surprise of what she'd heard. She turned around and saw a handsome man of about 25 who was staring at her with a slight and open smile. For some reason, his appearance was trustworthy, despite the fact that Kelly had always been cocky. In this case, she decided to simply ignore him, turning away without answering. I wanted to cry. You shouldn't be sad. You are so beautiful. Everything will be fine with you, said in a very soft, gentle, confident voice that was soothing. Immediately he turned away, seeing that she didn't want to talk to him. Anthony sighed sadly. Never really got to know the girls. Just like that. But walking down the street, seeing her on a bench, he couldn't pass her by. So gentle, exquisite, but with sad, vacant eyes. He knew that look, the look of hopelessness and indifference. What is her problem? The beautiful one is dressed quite expensively. So everything can be changed. So why the incredible sadness? He wanted to do something to help her. The what? But sometimes a couple of nice friendly words can force a person to get back on track and overcome his inner problems. After all, it is through talking that psychologists save people. Yes, I'm not much fun. But it's none of your business. Mind your own business. I still wanted to say something to put him in his place. I looked at him with a derogatory, condescending, cold stare. Yeah, that's right. No offense, just wanted to help. Smiled very nice and friendly. She didn't see a good-looking enough athletic guy in front of her, probably looking for another victim, like her ex. All men are the same. There was an unbearable ache in her soul again. How did she hate them all? I don't meet on the street, so don't try. Nothing will work with a slight hatred in his voice, said Kelly and turned away. Sorry, just wanted to do something to help. He stood up, picked up the wand that lay next to him on the other side, and walked slowly, leaning on his wand. Looking after him, Kelly was embarrassed. It became a little uncomfortable for this guy, even though he was an invalid himself. Trying to help support her, she did. Got up and caught up with him. Oh, excuse me. Let's take a walk together. She smiled, and he smiled back at her. From that moment on, they met almost daily. At first, a mad friendship developed between them. Trust in each other was helpful, supportive. Anthony was brought up in an orphanage, had a disability, received an apartment from the state, which she did not come to. Often enough, she helped him clean, do laundry, buy groceries. Despite the fact that he had a disability, he worked all the time on the internet, took on any even difficult work. I'm trying, Kelly. I still have a balcony to do. You see, I've mastered the repairs, so I'll just have to get married. And they laughed. But Kelly genuinely admired him. So strong every day, he worked out at home on the bar, had such an attractive, beautiful, pumped-up body. Their friendship was a true salvation for her. Even the anger of hatred she had felt toward her ex was just gone. Sort of cleansed herself of all the negativity, cleansed and free. She realized that when you overcome such moments, you become stronger, wiser. And if what happened to her had not happened, she would probably never have met Anthony. And he has become such a dear, close, best friend to whom you can tell everything. You make me feel insanely cozy here. When I come to you, it feels like I'm finally home. Where they wait, where it's warm, she rolled her eyes dreamily. My mouth looked at her with a certain sadness and mad love. He had a philosophical attitude to this life. He understood that it was hard for the poor to get by, knew that physical limitations were taking their toll on his life. But despite this, he strove and dreamed, knew I could do anything if I wanted to. As soon as he saw Kelly on the bench, he knew immediately that she was perfect, that his heart hammered harder. But there was no chance, and even now that they were best friends, he knew he couldn't give her anything good. She came from a rich family, a girl who had everything you could dream of. And what was he? He's nothing. Just a little cog in the workings of the capitalist machine of his life. Fate is a card game. Get lucky, don't get lucky. Nothing will help you build your world. What are you thinking about? Kelly looked at him very carefully. It seems that I love you, but I can't give you anything with my love. Only care for some reason decided to tell the truth. Kelly raised her eyebrows in surprise, but in fact she had long guessed and knew that Anthony loved her. She probably felt something for him too, but there was a restriction inside that warned her not to make hasty decisions. She had filigreed this conversation down to friendly love, but she understood that it was about something more sublime. She was not yet fully aware of her feelings, but she felt incredibly comfortable with him. She could confide all her secrets. She consulted, and often stayed with him. But most importantly, he had never hinted at a bed or a personal relationship before that day. Everything was sincere, pure, and incredibly open. I guess that's what real love is. There was no mad passion, which was replaced by pain and disappointment. There was stability, openness, total trust. Before she went home, she looked at him one more time. Amazing, so gentle, so beautiful. Insanely red, carrot-like hair, and green eyes, kind, bottomless, and so smiling, so unnatural in our modern times. If he had been born a woman, he would have been priceless with his looks. But born of no idea where and raised by no one. He was immersed in a world of seduction where he could only exist, and incredibly strong, having a disability, something with his leg, having a hope of recovery, as an expensive operation could make him complete, but not having a real opportunity. The guy was not discouraged, struggled and lived, created his paradise hut in the hope that one day he would bring his beloved here. Courageous, despite the fact that he spent most of his time at the computer, doing something, learning how to program. He started every morning with exercise. There was no passion between them, but there was something stronger. On her birthday, she hadn't decided to set the table at his place and spend the holiday for the first time with a man who was truly family to her. Every year until her 4th year, she went home on that day. Her father threw a fantastic party, trying once again to please his princess. And this was the first time she would celebrate her birthday away from home. And Kelly was insanely happy. Even though there were no tiger prawns, it was so familiar and sweet. That same day, they became close as man and woman. And it was that day that Kelly realized that passion was only a moment of lust, but love. A lake of passion that builds up gradually, reaching a climax of fantastic and unsurpassed emotion. When Anthony fell asleep, she got up and went to the kitchen. It seemed that everything in this cheap little apartment was native and beloved. She returned, lay down beside him, inhaling with her nostrils the scent of a relative and loved one. That day she realized they were made for each other. The feeling of being in love grew stronger every day. The semester ends soon. I'm going home. Kelly spoke with insane bitterness in her voice. Well, my parents miss me too. That's right. It was hard for him to let go too. But his father and mother are the most precious thing on earth. He had always dreamed of a full family, dreamed of being understood, loved, and pitied. Will you stay here? I will miss you. Her eyes were wet. Stop it. There's a phone. We'll chat. Go and enjoy being with family. Soon you'll be my family. She was sure of it. Maybe you're still young. Whatever you decide, that's how it's going to be. He never tried to limit her will. He loved her madly, but understood that she had many prospects. Right now it's now. And then things might change. He can't give her wealth. She's used to it. Once life begins to weigh on her, things could change dramatically. He looked at her and couldn't stop admiring her. Delicate, refined, delicate facial features, big eyes, little waves in her well-groomed hair. She was always wearing different rings, beautiful, expensive, luxurious bags, gorgeous and well-groomed. If he couldn't give a tenth of what she had now, how would their relationship change? What are you thinking? She sort of read his mind and watched inquisitively, trying to guess about the future. He lowered his eyes. It's going to be all right. The girl absolutely understood what he was thinking. Their future would be difficult. It will be hard to give up everything she used to consider basic needs. But brand-name things, expensive cosmetics, various pieces of jewelry are a misery, not life. She will never be like her mother, indifferent, soulless. Alex's father, a respected businessman who was rarely at home and saw no emotion from his wife. Her mother was indifferent to anything that didn't have a label on it. The father was only a huge wallet. This, however, did not make the man suffer at all. There was like an unspoken agreement between them in which he was rich and she was beautiful. At any event, they transformed into a loving couple played masterfully, but at home just scattered in different rooms. No scandal, no emotion. The family agreement even sounds awful. Think back on it all. Kelly grimaced, maybe not going, but she missed her father a lot. I have a wonderful dad. She looked at Anthony. I'll be sure to introduce you. "Of course," smiled the boy. "I will miss you. So call and write more often." Done. Kelly couldn't sleep for a long time. She seemed to want to go home. She missed her father very much. She hadn't seen much of him before, but he had always been a true friend to her. So she understood that she would understand and say go for it. And now she has a loved one who has become even closer than her father. So how would her father feel about her chosen one? He had never talked to him about such a future, never talked about her marriage. But he probably wouldn't be happy about the fact that his son-in-law was of no lineage, no money. Her father had been her friend, but he was a harsh, cruel, and abrupt man. Therefore, it was difficult to imagine his reaction. She should have prepared him for that. She didn't want to leave Anthony. She needed to be there for him. She knew in her gut that he was always on the edge of a struggle for life and a desire for death. Even though outwardly he was incredibly positive, strong, and determined, she knew it wasn't always like this. At night, she often stroked his hands, used by small scars. Some were very old, others more recent. How many times had this man, who had no or kin and knew no love, taken a blade in his hands, lay down in a hot bathtub, and cut the past, trying to get rid of his feelings of needlessness and reconnect with the universe? Why did this man feel like an outsider in life? A lot became clear after she saw these scars in his life did not make sense. Made it up himself to continue his journey and learn himself. Make a balcony, master programming, finish repairs. Could he be abandoned for an entire month? Yes, you can. He loves it. He will wait. Everything will be fine. Everything will be exactly as it needs to be. Now he is responsible not only for his, but also for her life. So he's not likely to do anything stupid. In the morning, Anthony just saw her off, trying not to think about being alone again. He had once been abandoned by his mother, simply brought to the orphanage, and then deprived of her parental rights. He tried to find her, looked all the places he had, but he couldn't find her. He was about 7 or 8 years old when his mother brought him in and gave him away. I remember her crazy red hair, green fox eyes, a huge scar on her left cheek, eyes full of grief and hopelessness. She told him then that she loved him, but she couldn't be a good mother to him. She said that because of her, he now has a disability, and because of her, he has no chance for the future. Maybe life will be merciful, and you can accomplish a lot. Maybe someone will take you in, and you'll have a future, but not with me. Large tears flowed from his mother, Lisa's eyes, as he now saw that picture again, beautifully catchy, but weary and miserable mommy. "I'll work, we'll get through this. I will always be there for you." He didn't understand much at the time, but he knew for sure he wanted to be there for her. He loved his mother with all his heart. "Son, remember me." She wiped her tears and took a very thin chain from her neck with a little column like a daisy. "Take it. Do not give it to anyone. It's your and my picture. It was a gift from your grandmother. I have done so many foolish things that I have no place on this earth. I love you. Remember that always. Always have and always will." Mommy, he smelled the warm smell of indignant milk and cheap perfume with hints of lumpy scent all over his body in front of me. That's the smell he sort of smelled even now. Mommy, all these thoughts made him indescribably sad. "Sweetheart, I'll be right back." Kelly loved her chosen one. She wanted to take him with her, but she knew it was premature. "Okay, call more often." He embraced her again as he had inhaled the scent of the woman he loved as a child. The scent was incredibly delicate and pleasant, delightful, and you could smell the delicate notes of lilac. It seemed that the scent of the woman he loved completely supplanted the scent of his beloved mother. Upon arriving home, Kelly immediately met her mother. "My goodness, my darling." Her mother rushed to hug and kiss her. Grew up in these 6 months. The pretty girl began to look at Kelly. "Mommy, I missed her." She snuggled up to her, but felt a certain detachment. "Honey, do you remember my dress?" She adjusted her yellow, incredibly gorgeous outfit. "Tell me how you, Nancy," looking at your daughter, saw your little bad copy of herself as not bad. But still, of course, Daddy will buy her a good groom, just like he bought any desired toys. All is well. The session is over. Everything is fine. Daughter put the coffee machine on. You want some coffee? It's not good for you. I only drink freshly squeezed juice. She looked at her kind of dismissive. Don't you go to the hairdresser? It's so important. Kelly was always surprised that her mother didn't care about her emotions or her spiritual state. The only thing Nancy cared about was looks and beauty. And now her own daughter, who had been gone for more than 6 months, whose eyes shone with mad love, received attention only in the matter of her hair. It even became kind of uncomfortable. Of course it matters. A woman should always remain a woman, beautiful, well-groomed, gorgeous. Otherwise men will not love. Proudly looked at his reflection in the huge refrigerator. Does your father love you? Asked her daughter with a challenge. Perhaps he doesn't, but he appreciates and respects you. The mother said with a little sadness in her voice, love, my dear. Not the most important thing in a relationship. Have you ever been in love? She really wondered. Mother is so cold. Did she ever have love? She did. She sat down at the table. Let's get some coffee, and she got all sad. If you don't want to tell me, don't tell me. Kelly felt some pain in her mother's soul and immediately felt sorry for her. I loved your father, loved Alex with all my heart. He was so attentive and unhappy, so beautifully courted. Loved him was just like you. Naive, pure, not without the fact that I wouldn't date a poor man. But it wasn't just the money. He wasn't as rich then, somewhat wealthy. Kelly put a nice, small cup of sugar on the table. She tried to make the atmosphere more pleasant. No, thank you. All right, I'll have the sugar. The girl put her cup on the table and began to spread. Your father was such a good caregiver. I loved him. He did. He never loved me. He had the only hippie love of his life. He still keeps her picture. My mother sighed sadly again. I found out when I was pregnant with you. I thought it was okay. I could break him. Love me was the smart one. You wouldn't believe it. I learned how to be an actress. Never crossed him. And he pretended to love me. But then he slowly drifted away. Mom, you don't have to tell me if you don't want to. My daughter didn't want to bring up the past. No, I'll tell you. He stopped coming into my bedroom, and at night he stayed in the study until morning. I went in once, and he was asleep on the desk where her pictures were. We haven't lived like husband and wife for a long time. That's the only joy. Shopping and beauty and all that. So there you go. It became obvious to Kelly. We really just became indifferent to everything. And it was all my father's fault. It was horrible to imagine that my mother loved him sincerely and honestly, as she loved no one. For the first time, her daughter saw her with sincere tears in her eyes. Father, but he also loved, but another. How terrible to live and know that your loved one does not respond to you, doesn't love, doesn't appreciate, just uses you as a social element. Immediately, I remembered Anthony. Honey, how she missed him. But why won't you leave your father? You're a pretty girl. You will find your love. She truly felt sorry for her mother. You may not believe me, but I still love him. I'm deliberately indifferent, but I do. I still have hope in my heart. Mommy, calm down. I hugged her daughter. Talk to him. No, and you do not tell him anything. Why not? Kelly always thought that all the family problems were because people didn't know how to be honest with each other. It didn't make sense. I got over it a long time ago, and I don't think anything will change. Nancy was open and frank for the first time in 20 years. All this time playing her role careless, infatuated only with appearances. Once it was a game, but over time it has become commonplace. Perhaps, but I think it's still worth talking about. Kelly said she thought she understood that openness, honesty could be an aid to anything. She saw that her mother sincerely loved her father, so she thought that this attitude could be resuscitated. Nancy was greatly saddened by the memory. That's why Kelly wouldn't talk about what kind of difficulties she was having with the man she loved. Kelly wanted to start living with Anthony, but she knew it was important to talk to her father about the relationship. She needed to get his blessing, and doing so would not be as easy as it seemed. Her father had always seemed to be on her side. But in fact, if she told him about Anthony's disability and the fact that he is from an orphanage, there is a good chance that her father would not accept her choice. And even that wasn't what terrified her. She understood that she would be able to finish her studies, and then she would be able to work full-time and cope with any difficulties. She didn't count on her father's money, but she was afraid he'd start putting sticks in the wheels, and maybe this one would bring Anthony back. Kelly wanted to make him happy and in no way wanted to be a source of trouble for him. My father returned from work in the evening. "My princess, how happy am I to see you." And the emotional connection with his daughter was very great. He loved no one in his life as much as he loved her. He worried that the baby girl's future would be unclouded and unproblematic. So he worked and tried to put everything off for her. "Daddy." She threw herself on his neck and sank into a soft but confident embrace. "How good of you to come. Why didn't you tell me I would have met you today? You said nothing yesterday." Theatrically, he shifted his eyebrows and made a stern look. "Father wanted to surprise you." His daughter looked at him with eyes full of delight. Dad always knew how to look gorgeous. Kelly realized now that he must have had a million girls chasing him, and he didn't like his mother. I wonder what the one he loved was like, the one who conquered his mind for years to come. Or maybe his mother was wrong, and he was just holding some kind of resentment against souls. So they have no real family, just a visual deception. Surprised, Mother saw, he said with a certain monotony. Yes, she and I already had coffee. And how luxurious he looked. But the eyes are sad. Kelly had always had some subconscious flair for me, to see his problems. Now the visibility was without excitement, but the excitement was inside him. Yes, there were some difficulties at work, but it was the little things as usual. How was your studies? In peaceful conversations we met in the evening. Then the family sat down for dinner. Everything was as perfect as ever, like her parents rehearsed dinner or breakfast in the evenings. No bickering complaints, fake smiles. Honey, it's just like the best movies. If you're an outsider, caught here at this casual dinner table, you probably thought of the perfect family in front of you, and only Kelly knew it was a game. Now she also learned that her mother was not a soulless doll, but a perfectly normal and adequate woman, who from her inner pain and disappointment in love, just put on a mask. For several days, Kelly did not dare to talk to her father. The situation irritated her. She had no doubt that she loved Anthony and wanted to be with him. In the evenings, they would text for hours about absolutely nothing. She tried to be supportive of the boy because she was afraid that loneliness might play a cruel trick on him again. Honey, I want to talk to my father about us, but I don't dare. I tried to make my voice nonchalant. It's kind of cool, by the way. You can talk about it another time. Anthony somehow didn't understand her doubts and worries at all. I was thinking of moving in with you next semester. You don't mind. They had talked to him repeatedly about it. And if the last time, she herself had said that she needed to think about it. Today, Kelly was sure that she wanted to move in with Anthony, and as soon as possible. Sure, move in. His voice dropped. The boy adored Kelly. She was the center of the universe and his whole life. He wanted to live for her, to create, to build, to create. He wanted to do something beyond himself, just to live and breathe the air she breathed. For the first time in my life, I felt happy again. Every time he looked at himself in the mirror, he thought of how his mother had abandoned him because of his appearance, unattractive because of his leg, unreliable because of his disobedience, incompetent, tormented himself with many doubts and torments. When Kelly came into my life, everything became completely different. In general, he stopped thinking about his mother, thinking about the past, opening the door to the present future. Every night the girl called him, telling him how her day was going, and he spent all day working on an old chair in the garage. His sophisticated and aristocratic girlfriend had once expressed an insane fascination with rarities. Anthony, on the other hand, remembered that he had an old chair in his garage that could be restored. The old thing gradually transformed. There was a lot of work to be done. But in a month his love would arrive. It would be the best gift for her. Besides repairing the chair. Time passed more quickly, but still anxious thoughts visited him. He imagined that she would not tell her father, and that he would not let her come here, let her not go to him. That might well happen. And in that case, what? Why should he live? No, he's bound to be happy. He will have a huge family. He will be strong. He'll be strong forever. That's what Kelly had taught him. The girl, on the other hand, was getting ready to take the first step toward a decisive conversation. Her father stayed home for the weekend. Her mother left for another treatment. And Kelly and her father decided to have lunch together. Everything is as usual, traditional, beautiful. Maria, their constant housekeeper and cook, set everything up. Maria, you can be excused. Rest. I'll take care of Daddy. Milo herself smiled at Kelly, her favorite housekeeper, who was well, dear Alex, may I go yet? She interjected from the host. Of course, if the daughter wants to take care of her father, so be it. He smiled. Then bon appetit. Maria checked everything on the table. Then she left. In the meantime, Kelly and her father were enjoying the stew, which was unparalleled, delicious and fragrant. As soon as the housekeeper left, Kelly decided to start her own conversation. Dad, tell me, have you ever really loved someone that much? She tried to make her voice more pleasant and nonchalant. Sure enough, there was a noticeable shadow of inner disappointment running across his face. There was a sadness in his eyes. You don't have to say anything if you don't want to. She hoped that he, like her mother, would be frank with her. Why talk about it? He looked at her carefully and shrewdly. I fell in love. She paused tragically. Daughter, great. And who's the lucky guy? It was amazing. His little princess grew up and became an adult. Her father looked at her intently and penetratingly. Quite grown up, he would have to part with her. She will live in another house. Well, I will introduce you, of course. Then I faced betrayal, and he supported me, became my best friend, then my favorite person. I can't imagine now how I lived without him. Anthony is a wonderful man. Kelly spoke at length and told me everything, all in the best colors and tones. But most importantly, she missed the information about her lover's disability and lack of steady work, too harsh and stern. Her father looked at her, but her words touched the soul. Men. He remembered his only love, beautiful with red hair, bright eyes, and gentle hands. Can you hear me? Kelly noticed that the man's thoughts were elsewhere. He remembered his life. You make it sound so romantic. It brings back memories of my love. He lowered his eyes as tears seemed to appear in them. You knew the answer about your mother, but you wanted to hear the story from him. Your mother I have great respect for. She's perfect, but I love someone else so much. I decided to answer my daughter with frankness for frankness. And who was she? The girl tried to make an interested appearance. As soon as I started in the business, I met her. Very beautiful, but what attracted me to her was something else. She is lively, so free in everything. We started dating. I found out that she already had a child. But that didn't scare me off. It was so great romantically. She was special. But as soon as I offered to live with her, she ran away together. I looked for her afterwards. But all like this, I got up and got a bottle. You want some good wine? Sure. She didn't want wine. She wanted to talk, to make her father more mellow. Then maybe we could talk about everything. Heard a lot about her, but no facts. And again, father's heavy sigh. Didn't you see her again? No. A year later, I met your mother. Got married. But it was hard to forget her. Life with her was somehow colorful, different. Once she was gone, there was an emptiness and the colors died. He drank the wine in a gulp. I see. But it was a right. Right in that her father didn't love her, but tormented her. You know, when the colors came back into my life, he looked questioningly at his daughter. And then, when you were born, you became my salvation, and life became bright. That's how my mother and I live. Everything is going well for us. Do you have those opportunities now? Don't you want to find your love? The daughter really didn't understand why her parents weren't separating, but torturing each other. No, not anymore. I have a family, said the father confidently. But family is not a sentence. Why do you torment your mother? He looked at him with eyes full of hatred. Yes, your mother is fine. She never thinks about anything but money. Though she used to love me, my father almost shouted. She did, and she does. Kelly jumped up. Did you make her like that? The one who loved poetry so much, dedicated it to me. He drank the wine in a gulp again. What makes you think Mom doesn't love you? Kelly, he lowered his tone a little. I don't know. That's what it sounded like to me. Mama told me herself that she loved you, and she did. She knew you loved someone else, and she suffered. Kelly stammered. I promised not to tell my mother too. Her voice trembled. Father looked at her very shrewdly and wondered if you had surprised me. Thought she was indifferent. He wondered. After this conversation, his father remembered the past, remembered the one that had made him unhappy. A love that had no equal. It was not beauty that had won her over, but something else. She wrote him poems, not friezes. There was talk of true love. But she was a free bird, didn't want to be dependent. He lied to his daughter, not telling the truth. They lived together. She had a baby boy. He wanted to adopt him. He was willing to work around the clock for her. She needed attention. She often went off without telling him where she left the baby unattended. He would freak out and scream, and she would sit there and look at him. At first, there was a mad passion. They did what they wanted. He would run his errands and hurry home to her. Then he started spending more time at work. She goes out without him. Jealousy set in. One day he saw her with someone else. They were just standing and talking. But when they came home, Alex was frantic, insulting, humiliating, threatening to take the baby away. After that, she was gone in the morning. There were no belongings. What was left was a broken heart. He looked for her. She was living with another man who demanded nothing of her, but was incredibly abusive. Beat her. She ran off to unknown destinations. Looked for a long time, but to no avail. Wanted to prove to himself and to her, if she came back, that she had made a mistake. So I got married. Nancy was subtle, gentle, vulnerable, but later showed she wasn't like that at all. Became more sassy. Remembered the moment that was the split in their lives. After giving birth, she walked into the office where he was. Who is this woman, Alex? She looked with eyes full of tears. The woman she loved. He said with a challenge. What about me? The wife looked with a sadness of hope. What about you? You do not have enough money. What don't you have enough, Miss Beauty? He did not believe in her love. Never. You hear me, you'll never love me again. Money is money. And she left with her head held high. Always in public, the perfect one conjured up the image of the perfect family. He was surprised. This evening had come as a surprise to him. The little daughter who had kept the fire of life alive in him was now an adult and would soon be married. Who was this man? Will he be able to make Kelly happy? Only questions. We need to get to know him. He had high hopes that his daughter's chosen one loves her, not the money she has. After all, that happens quite often these days. He hoped that his daughter would be happy, and not, as he did, stare hopefully at women passing by, hoping to see the one. He pulled out pictures of the beautiful ones. The red-haired girl, looking at him coquettishly from the picture. Afterward, he began to revisit the family photos. Nancy, they had a happy, beautiful smile all over them, the happiest image possible. He really thought his spouse was happy with the unlimited limit card she was using. And it turned out that she loved and suffered. Was this true? If the wife has been suffering all this time, living her invented story, maybe it's not too late to change things. After all, he had already lost the woman he loved because of his pride. And Nancy, friend of his for 40 days, always without complaint, always ready to come to the rescue. Maybe we should try again. But now the first priority is to meet his daughter's fiancé. Kelly said she would get along with him, try to live together. So it was necessary to get to know the future in-law. Something inside of him told me that he was not telling the truth and something was obviously wrong. Hi. Nancy walked into the office where he was sitting in his thoughts. I wanted to ask if we have any meetings or events next week. I need to plan everything. Every Sunday, she would come in asking these questions. Then she planned everything properly and well. No, Nancy, he looked at her extremely carefully. Can you stay? Kelly looked surprised, but stopped, closed the door, gracefully walked over to the couch and sat down. He stood up and walked over to her. He sat down beside her. Could it really be that all these years she loved him? She waited for attention, which he did not give her. Listening to you businesslike with complete indifference, she asked her husband, "Did you know that your daughter wanted to get married?" Said she was in love, but to get married. Kelly was really surprised. Yes, she wants to live with him starting next semester. He sat even closer. What do you think? I think if it's love, let him try. If it's love, they'll live together no matter what. If not, life will divorce them fast. Kelly was just as wise. God, what a beautiful, resilient, wise woman she is. Why had he never looked at her as a real woman? Always from day one he thought she was mercurial, because she was just convenient. And now his daughter had suddenly opened his eyes. What had this woman done to him? Why had he tormented her for years, neglecting her and replacing it with money? It wasn't Kelly's fault that he lost his first love and then invented misery for himself, making her suffer too. Nancy, he didn't know how to begin his conversation. Yes, the whole thing was amazing. With her husband, everything was always discussed dryly and specifically, like in an office. Do you believe she was in love? There might be such a thing. Kelly looked at him with eyes full of wonder. Were you in love with me? He asked in an almost whisper. Nancy was even more surprised, stared and didn't understand. Loved. Kelly lowered her eyes. And now, the man looked penetratingly. Nancy lowered her head and turned away in a gentle motion. He turned her toward him and looked into her eyes. Say, yes, but I understood it all back then. That's when you said you loved and would love someone else all the time. Her voice filled with tears. Let's try it all over again, my darling. He pulled her to him and hugged her. Why? She didn't understand the change that had happened to her husband to be happy. From that day on, their relationship became completely different. It was as if their feelings had sharpened. They really decided to start all over again. Or rather, not from the beginning, but from scratch. Nancy really became an incredibly happy woman. She had a man by her side who surrounded her with care and attention that she had never, in fact, known. When her daughter left, she was insanely happy for her parents, knowing that she had had a hand in it, knew they wouldn't have started without her. A new phase of her life to build a new relationship. Her father promised that very soon he would come to meet his future son-in-law. Naturally, she was not very much afraid, but at the same time, she understood that it would be impossible to build a future with her chosen one without it. She was worried that there could be certain difficulties and problems in the relationship between her father and Anthony. After all, they were so different. My father knew very clearly what he was striving for. He was always brutal and tough, and Anthony is completely different, soft, gentle, vulnerable. She felt sorry that these two completely different people would have to communicate. It might be difficult for them to build a relationship. When she arrived in town, Kelly immediately went to see Anthony. I missed you so much. I feel like we haven't seen each other in forever. She hugged him and held him in her arms. Don't let go. It really seemed to Kelly that if they let him go, he would go somewhere. There was a peace of mind in her soul now. She really loved this man. It was hard without him when she saw him. She just could not tear herself away, hugging and kissing the only man with whom she wanted to be open and real. How moved, he smiled softly, and at the same time squeezed her tightly in his arms. Everything is wonderful. Indeed, her trip had incredible results. The parents reconciled, or rather, not reconciled, but simply became close and intimate with each other. The only thing she didn't want to talk about was talking to her father about the fact that she had never really told him anything about Anthony. That's fine. Let's go see my present. It's amazing how this man, who just 6 months ago had been a stranger and an outsider, sensed her mood subtly and clearly. She did not want to talk about the conversation with her father, and he did not ask. It was as if her inner intuition sensed this gift. She was well aware of the fact that he had little enough money that he would not be able to meet her wants and needs. Kelly decided a long time ago that she didn't need valuables, rich, expensive gifts of any kind. All she needs is his pure, sincere love. Someone in this life, with the help of their parents' money, seeks the power of fame. But she didn't want anything, only him by her side. I wonder what he wants to give her as a gift. Are you trying to treat me with something? But let's go see, leaning on his wand. He took her by the hand and led her into the garage, opened the door, and before her stood a magnificent chair, vintage, luxurious, rare, beautifully restored. It was fantastic. She adored such things, and it even seemed likely that a queen had sat in that chair, but at the very least, it was amazing how this man had accomplished such a miracle with his own hands. It was most likely an antique chair, and he had restored, cleaned, made it beautiful, and all for her. She told him a long time ago that she liked this kind of thing. Used to dream that when she had her own house, she would buy a huge amount of stuff like this. And then she met Anthony and realized that a lot of things she used to dream about would never come true. I didn't want to say anything to him about money. She knew perfectly well that he could not fulfill her wishes. Therefore, it is not necessary to make him feel inferior. And now she was very clearly and accurately aware that this close relative of her loved one very subtly sensed her desire, even without money, trying to realize it. The chair was delightful. She threw herself on his neck, hugged him, and pouring tears. And he laughed, realizing that they were tears of happiness. He did not ask silly and unnecessary questions, just smiled, hugged her, and kissed her weeping eyes. The days ran on merrily and carefree. Kelly realized that very soon she would become a specialist, go to work. They could live a full, independent life. She told him she was moving out, and a few days later she did move in. They formed a small and dignified family. Everyone supported each other, understood each other. He even helped her write her notes. It was so gentle and romantic that she was not just thrilled. The only thing that scared her over and over again was that she never told her father everything. And someday she would have to. One day there was a knock on the door. She opened it. There was her father on the doorstep. She had left the address with her mother, just in case. Now she realized that was the wrong decision. She realized her father couldn't have done anything else. He had just come unannounced, had come to talk and see everything with his own eyes. Dad's surprise and grief of soul, there was no limit. The daughter was not ready for such a conversation, much less a meeting. Nor was Anthony ready. She was afraid that Daddy might hurt him now, and things would not go as she had planned. They had lived so well, everything had been wonderful. And now it might ruin everything because of her father, who, not understanding the situation, would surely do something wrong. That would be a shame. Kelly, I only hoped for one thing, that he would understand her and forgive her for her father. Yes, he loves, will understand that he could not do otherwise, could not leave an address. So this situation was inevitable. I understand you're surprised, but I decided to come and meet my son-in-law to have a look. How do you live here? Do you need any help? He did not stop talking. Dad understood that Kelly was in a certain stupor, but at the same time, he couldn't take it anymore. Every day, the thought lived in his corner that he had absolutely no idea to whom he had given his daughter, who was now in charge of her life and her welfare. So he made a decision for himself to go and figure it all out. Nancy, of course, objected, but he always acted independently and decisively, while the operator handed her a bag of groceries and began to gradually develop. We weren't expecting guests at all. We should have at least given some warning. I said banal, meaningless phrases. I realized that there was nothing to change, nothing to worry about. I bought everything to set the table. My father went into the kitchen, looked around, stunned. The poverty, the apartment with thin walls, the complete absence of any comfort. There was an old stove in the kitchen, no dishwasher. It was just a nightmarish environment, impossible to describe in words. It even felt like a rat was about to run through there. Not because it was dirty, but because it was old and squalid and miserable. My father went into the living room. How can you call this a living room? A living room with shabby old carpets, and it's amazing how they're still there. Does his daughter really live here? And looking at her, one could not tell that she was unhappy. Her smile was cheerful and fresh. What on earth is going on here? It's so disgusting, horrible. It's just impossible. One room that played the role of a living room bedroom. Everything here was kind of frozen in time. Old cabinets, a scary couch. But in the center of this horrifying room was a gorgeous vintage armchair. It was probably the only element here that wasn't disgusting. Where is my future son-in-law? Dad tried to hold back, covering his nausea. Went to the store. My daughter was practically whispering as she saw the look in the man's eyes. She knew what he was thinking. She realized that something terrible was about to happen. She saw the jowls begin to walk on his cheeks, and the veins in his neck throbbed. She realized that it was about to explode, and if she was lucky, it would explode before Anthony came and left, which meant there would be no scandal. But if unlucky, the scandal will break when the future son-in-law arrives. She was afraid of her father, but she was even more afraid of losing Anthony. So she pulled herself together. She looked at her father with a stern, even stern look. Kelly suddenly felt as if she had become a little copy of him. He could feel the jowls on her cheeks beginning to walk, and the veins throbbing on her neck. Go away, just go away. The daughter said it even with a slight tug. It seemed that now she herself will start this scandal, kick him out, scream, and never want to communicate with him again. Most importantly, to leave her father turned to her with surprise, looking at her, not understanding how his little princess, delicate, sophisticated, so exquisite, suddenly turned into a resident of a communal apartment, defending their square footage. Probably now would really be a serious scandal, and if the door did not open and did not appear on the doorstep, whether he was surprised, but looked at the stranger standing next to his beloved, guessed that it was her father, always understood everything without words, as if he sensed some kind of internal, almost animal instincts. Good afternoon, and we have guests. He held out his hand in a friendly manner to her father. She was a little confused. She did not introduce them to each other, despite the fact that her father really went pale. He shook hands with his future son-in-law, looked at him dismissively and even derogatorily. He looked at him again. Yes, handsome, athletic, muscular figure, but an invalid. He stood leaning on a stick. It was awful. I mean, his beautiful daughter, who had a huge dowry, unlimited financial resources, was now living with an invalid in this miserable apartment. The world must have gone crazy. It's probably just sleeping. He needed to pinch himself to wake up soon. Everything was so horrible to him that it seemed unreal. After sitting his father down with Anthony in the hall, Kelly began to prepare the shabby old plates for the table, where there was an open crystal vase in which she poured a salad. It was all as if he had now gotten into a time machine and traveled back in time. But my father steadied himself, held on. When everyone sat down at the table, and drank some wine, he suddenly decided to finally talk to his daughter. He realized it wasn't worth the wait. We need to dot our I's and cross our T's. Talk. At this, he didn't want to. Asked him where he worked. Got the answer that there was nowhere to work on a computer. This finally convinced him that he needed to talk now. There was no reason to postpone such a serious complaint. His mind was screaming at him to stop. Realized that now he could lose his daughter forever. His grievances burned her soul, perhaps planting a seed of hatred between father and daughter. But the temper in some demon that had always been in him screamed everything. Say it. Get her out of here. Make it right. Come on. Let's go out to the kitchen, he practically hissed. Okay. Kelly took Anthony's hand. Saw him turn pale, felt the storm coming. It's going to be okay. Honey, I love you. In the kitchen, my father wouldn't even sit down on the stool. He looked at everything with eyes full of disgust. What is all this, Kelly? What is it? He was no longer holding back his emotions and spoke quite loudly, not understanding what you daughter. Turned away from him, trying to make his voice quieter, as if to motivate him, also lower the volume. I mean, what is all this about? You living in this miserable apartment. There's no living space here, nothing to attract you. And this man is cute, yes, but he's handicapped. You realize that he makes absolutely no money. How are you going to live? He was talking more and more by the second. Is this a man? Is it a man who lives in this miserable room and brought his beloved woman into it? Yes, the walls in the apartment are very thin. So whether or not he heard absolutely everything was unpleasant, but he understood perfectly well why her father was so upset and distressed. He probably wouldn't have been thrilled if he were him either, but he also understood that he was precious to Kelly. Realized that money wasn't everything in life. He didn't want to hear any more of what was going on in the kitchen. He started walking around the room, but it was impossible not to hear what was going on there. He wanted to come in and say his manly word, but then he realized that it all made no sense. Right now, it was better just to be silent. Then his father would be gone, and they would live a normal, peaceful life again. Maybe Kelly and her father wouldn't talk for a while, but then they would reconcile. Everything will be fine. Her father will eventually accept the situation, and perhaps at some point she will realize that her father was telling the truth and leave Anthony. From excitement and inner discomfort, he walked around the room, taking souvenirs that were on the shelves, moving his guitar from place to place. Then he decided to just play and sing a song so he couldn't hear what was going on in the kitchen, to actually create a background noise. He ran his thin fingers over the guitar strings and then sang along. Dad turned pale. No, it even seemed that his lips were trembling, or played and sang, and her father changed before her eyes. Then he just rushed into the living room. How do you know that song? He practically shouted, Mother sang it to me. Surprised, but sure Anthony couldn't figure out what was going on. So you're from an orphanage. My father seemed to have lost his mind. She gave me away when I was 7 or 8. The kid couldn't hide his surprise anymore. What was her name? Sitting down on the couch, asked his father. Lisa, is she alive? I don't know. This is how fate brought him to a state where there was an opportunity to correct his mistakes of youth. It was the same baby he had once cradled in his arms, the son of his only beloved woman. The one he worshipped, the one who made him happy, showed a completely different, vibrant life. He looked at him and realized that the red hair, the green eyes were just like hers. Now, more than ever at any other time, he realized he had made a mistake. There was no need to meddle in his daughter's personal life. They were happy after all. And maybe this is how happy he would have been with Lisa. Together, they would have overcome everything. But his insolence of total control changed everything. She left, and then he was left to wander the world, where he was never able to raise his only child. And the only thing he can do in memory of his former love for the woman who made him happy and, in fact, created him the way he is now, it is to give his daughter and son the opportunity to be happy. When he heard the first lines of the song, he realized that these were the same verses he'd been writing, the favorite verses he remembered all his life. From that moment, Alex became more attentive to people, decided to spend more time at home with his wife, appointing an executive in his firm, daughter and son-in-law, who very quickly won his heart. With his kind disposition, he gave a home where everything was perfect, told the young ones about his love, spoke much to Anthony about his mother, whom he hardly knew, showed him the pictures he had saved, which he also gave him. Not only did they build their carefree, happy future in their new home, his father paid for an operation to correct a limp and allowed him to run the company website, which allowed him to get additional clients. And not only did Nancy find a loved one who finally paid attention to her and showered her with love, Kelly was preparing to become a mother again.